Hello! Today I am really excited to introduce my guest. His name is Rafael Dona, and he also happens to be my virtual assistant, the man behind the magic that makes it even possible that these podcasts are produced. I would have been completely lost without his help. So, Rafael, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Julie. The pleasure is all mine.
Now, tell everybody where you're calling from right now.
Well, my name is Rafael with a hard R, and I'm from Venezuela. Actually, Julie contacted me from from Seattle. I think is where you're from.
Yeah, I'm in Spokane, Washington, although today I happen to be in Oslo, Norway.
That's true.
This is crazy the way the technology works, that I can be speaking to you in Oslo and you're in Venezuela. We're making this happen.
We've known each other since like November, but we haven't properly met in person.
That's true. That's true. It's all been virtual.
Yeah, you've been a constant in my life since November. So
that's right. As a matter of fact, I'll share a little bit about how I ended up even finding you before we talk about your situation, because I think it's really it's a fascinating thing. What happened right around the time that I had known for a couple of years that I felt like I needed to share some of the things that I had learned about grief. My perspective, as you know, is I was married the first time to someone who had been widowed.
Yeah.
And that was really helpful and eye-opening. I learned a lot about just how to interact with people who are grieving from my husband. And then he passed away after we'd been married for about 25 years. And so then a lot of what I had already learned was familiar, but then there were other aspects of it that were new because it was the first time I was experiencing it for myself.
Yeah, you had all the theory, but none of the practice.
Exactly. Yeah. And there were absolutely things that I felt helped me to get through that really, really hard time. And it's still hard. I mean, there are still, I can say even within the last few days, I cried because I missed my husband, even though I have since remarried another widowed man. And we share that common experience, and it's been a really nice thing to share life with someone who understands that kind of grief.
Is it comforting?
It is. It's very comforting. It is. But it's interesting how you never replace people that you lose, and they're always in your heart. And but I had no idea how to even go about the technical aspect of producing a podcast. And I have a friend at home. Her name's Stacy. She has a podcast. She showed me a lot of some of the how-tos, what to use, but then the real technical aspect of it, I definitely needed some help. And so my friend who put my website together was using a VA, a virtual assistant. And I had never heard of this, but it makes so much sense that there would be people all over the world with skills that don't require in-person, interactions. Right. And so she directed me to that group that you somehow were a part of, and you'll have to share with me how that works.
Yeah.
And they gave me 3 different young candidates to interview, and your portfolio, you were kind of the clear front runner. And then when you and I had that interview together, I didn't even have to finish a sentence, and you would say, "Oh, so you need this," or "Oh, so you're looking for this." And I thought, yes, someone who reads my mind. That's what I need.
I remember that interview because I was like, okay, so we're really connected. Like we can
Yeah.
get each other. Yeah.
Yeah, it was really great how our
Hmm.
yeah, this definite meeting of the minds. So I definitely felt like you were the right person at the right time and just placed right in my path for something very important to me, and it's been a fantastic experience.
Oh,
But now
thank you.
I would like you to introduce yourself and give your side of that, you know, conversation and
Yeah, well, um, okay, so let's go to the beginning. How did I get into ABA? I work in ABA, which is an agency for virtual assistants. And it was because, first of all, I'm a video editor, and I used to be, I still am a radio producer because I still have the title and I still have my diploma and everything. So I am. And I've been searching for, since I finished university. I've been searching for jobs that lead into that, lean more into video editing because I was doing just freelance work about it. And I was like, okay, I need something secure because even though you can get the clients, there are some lousy or some low months that you actually need that money. So I was
Mhm,
like, okay, I
yeah,
need a proper job.
yeah.
And a friend of mine recommended me to into ABA. So I got into ABA maybe in, I don't know, maybe in early October, something like
Okay.
that. And they told me like, and when I was just getting into it, they had this little tab like, okay, so you can actually select the category that you want to work with. And the first one that I appeared was video editor, and I was like, oh my god, this is the place. It could be the place.
Yeah.
So I got into it, I got hired, and like 2 weeks later, they contact me like, okay, so you have one interview. I had this first interview, it was my first client. And just 3 days after that, they told me like, we know that you have a radio background and that you like podcast. Would you like to produce another one? And I was like, of course, that's the type of job that I'm looking for. And that's how I got into usually.
Really? Wow,
And
okay.
it's a actually it was a rush because they sent me all of the stuff like 3 days before our meeting. So I was like, okay, so I need to prepare what is going on. Thankfully, you had your website, and I was like, okay, this is all the information that I need to start this.
That's fantastic. Yeah, you definitely had done your homework. That
Yeah.
impressed me. Yeah, not all of the candidates had actually even looked at my website.
Yeah, but it was the only information that they provided me, and that I remember that they told me like, but it's a grieving podcast, and I remember thinking like, okay, so you haven't been through a grieving experience, so I might need to do some research about it and see how I get it. And I know that religion was a big part of the podcast, and it was an important part for you. So it's like,
Mhm.
okay, I actually need to get in onto this, so to impress in the meeting.
Yes. Well, you didn't make anything up, did you?
No, 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 not at all. I think that I was pretty clear with you, and even with the religious part, like since, and that's something that has really impressed me since we've gotten to know each other and I've gotten to know more of like American culture because in here in Venezuela we're not Christians, we're Catholics, and
Well,
it's
Catholics are Christians,
well, yeah,
but I
yeah.
understand you're saying it's a specific flavor.
Yeah, it is because
Understood.
in Spanish it kind of like it is a different definition. Actually, you have Christian churches in here and Catholic churches,
Mm.
so it's kind of like different for me. And I told you everything that I know about my Catholicism and everything like that. But once I started talking with you and actually getting to know more about Christianism, it was like, okay, so this is a totally different culture, and they do things totally different.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Even some of the language is different, right?
Yeah, like totally. For example, even the grieving, not the grieving part, but I think that we once have had this conversation. Like, when you say that someone died, you use the word passed away. With I think
Right,
it's beautiful. It's a beautiful word. But in Spanish, you have like falleció. Falleció. It's literally he died, like
right,
dead. It's like.
right.
Mhm. It's like
Yeah, we
that.
did. I remember having that conversation about the nuances in the words because usually Spanish is so lovely, but you said, yeah, this word in Spanish is just it's just blah.
It's
There
terrible.
it
Yeah. It's like Spanish is beautiful in some things. And kind of like English. Like it's beautiful in some parts, but then when you get into the technical aspects of it, it's not as beautiful as you would think.
is.
It's like,
Yeah.
imagine if I went into your, because that's the word that I know. Imagine if I just went into everybody's house or every event saying like, no, my dad is dead, because that is the word that we use in here. Like
Yeah, my dad is dead.
that, like
It's very
fly.
final. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, right. Yeah, we've talked a lot about language on
yeah,
different episodes of the podcast.
yeah.
How we say things can add to somebody's grief or actually soften the
It
grief.
is, and during these episodes, because I've also noticed it's not what you say, it's how you say it. It and doesn't matter what language are you talking about it, or are you saying stuff, but it's how you treat people during the process of grief that it's like what could really help them go through. It's not a simple it's you can tell, like I'm sorry for an I'm so sorry, like, you know what I mean, like
Right,
you can understand that part.
right, right.
Hmm.
Well, and I remember during our interview, it was important to me that you had um, some kind some some kind of loss or grief, some familiarity, so that you could be sensitive
Yeah,
to what people were going through. And you had mentioned that you had lost your abuela,
yeah,
your
my
grandmother had passed away, and you even have a little
I have,
tattoo on your finger, right?
yeah, here is a little
Very
ring with
yes,
her initial. Yeah, I
yes.
love I lost my, yeah. It was actually a pretty difficult. It wasn't kind of like a difficult time, but I think that was the first time that I really experienced grief, like with the
Mhm.
loss of my grandmother, because she died on 2020 because of COVID.
Oh,
And
yeah.
yeah, and it was a terrible loss. And I got the news. I was still in university by that time. I was maybe in like the sixth semester, and I had an interview for a journalism class, and I got the news just before the interview.
Oh my
And
goodness.
yeah, and it was an important interview because I had to make like a whole paper, and I was interviewing a really important comedian from here because I wanted to
Wow.
do a comedy stuff. I wanted
Oh
to
my gosh, that is
it's
it's almost a comedy that you had to have that scenario, isn't it?
yeah, it's so ironic, and I couldn't actually tell it because from during the interview I would zone out, and I couldn't tell to the guest like, okay, sorry, my abuela just died, so
Yeah, that's right.
give me just one
Yeah,
second.
yeah. Let me compose myself here. Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow. Wow. But then what happened, in those just it was really only 2 or 3 days between the interview and then when we decided that we were gonna hire you.
oh yeah, that's the
The
part. Yeah, yeah,
that's the most ironic thing that
yeah,
happened.
that's the part where you said that you, and I find it kind of like beautiful and something. I'm not saying it isn't funny, but it's beautiful because you said
Mhm.
to me that I was at the right moment at the right place, and you were there for me too at the right moment at the right place, because this was we had our interview. I remember the date very well, on November 20th, 2023.
Mhm.
And my dad had been going through a process where he needed a surgery. They had to take his they had to remove his left kidney, I think, because of some problem stuff that he has been having. I can tell it right now because I just know those words in Spanish. I don't know them in
Yeah,
English.
yeah, yeah, and that's okay.
Yeah. And I remember that during that day, I left him at the hospital because he was going to be hospitalized for about 5 days. It was a really, really simple procedure, really simple surgery. And Well, I left him at the hospital, said goodbye to him, see you tomorrow. And then and I remember that I was in a rush because I had this interview. I was like, I need to get home quickly because I need to prepare myself for this interview and whatever. And we actually started talking. We had that interview, we had everything going on. And by the next day, my dad passes away. Like just the day after I have this interview with a client that it's going to teach me about grief. I was like, it
Right.
was, and I remember some things from that day that I had some multiple signals that he was going to pass away. Aside from
Really?
you, yours was the strongest. Like that was like, I even got scared after our interview. I was like, I remember,
Wow.
yeah, because I was all alone here in my house. I had to pick up my brother from high school. My mom was with my dad, and I was just in here. I was like, I hope this doesn't mean what I think that it means. Like I remember that thought because I was like cooking some pasta, and I was like, I hope this doesn't mean what I think. And when I was done finishing my lunch, I received a call like on the same day, but it was a pretty chill call. It was my aunt from my mother's side,
Mhm.
and she was talking to me regularly, like because on the hospital that what my dad was, they didn't have good telephone service,
Yeah.
so they couldn't reach him by call, and they called
So
me to my
people were checking in with you to see how your dad was doing?
yeah, and I could talk to my dad from time to time, and he was like,
Mhm.
"I'm so great. I'm just so relieved that I'm going to get away from this pain. I'm
Oh my
so
gosh.
yeah." He told me like, "I'm actually desperate. If it were up to me, I'll have the surgery right now, in the middle of the night, just so I can sleep better and get home to my kids like 3 days after."
Oh my god.
Yeah, and the call that I received was my aunt, and we were talking just about life, and because after I gave her the update about my dad, and she started talking to me about my granddad on my mother's side. I actually never met my granddad, and I actually carry his name. He was a Rafael too.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
really sweet.
yeah, and he died like 10 years before I was born. So yeah, so he has been just one of like those presences. Like
Yeah,
you don't know who he is, but you know he's with you. Like he was
right.
like yeah, and she told me about everything about how my granddad passed away. I don't know why, and that's information that I've never had. Like I didn't know how my granddad passed away. I just know that he did. I was born. I didn't have a maternal granddad. That's something that was normal for me. And she
Right.
started talking to me like, okay, so don't say this to your mother because he never talked to you about it because it's a pretty difficult thing for her, a pretty difficult topic.
Uh-huh.
But she just started telling me the whole story like, okay, so your granddad suffered from this, got both legs amputated, and he just passed away. And I was like, oh. And when I finished that call, I was like, this is a second signal. I I hope this doesn't mean what I think it means.
Right.
Yeah, and when I picked up my then there was a third signal that same day. That's why I think that I was prepared for his
Yeah.
passing.
Uh-huh.
And I picked up my brother from high school, and I told him like, okay, now we need to get to my paternal side aunt
Mhm.
house.
Mhm.
Guess we need to pick up. I don't know. She had like turkey for us, like a whole
Okay.
turkey for us. I
Right.
don't know why. And
Okay.
it was the most random thing. It was like 4 p.m. in the afternoon, and we just had to go to cross the whole other city because she lives on the other side of the city to pick up a turkey. I was like,
Okay.
and we just went there, and I was talking to my brother, and I was like, "Did my mother ever told you about Abuelo Rafael? Like, did she tell you that story?" And he was like, "No, I've never actually known anything about him about except that he was named Rafael."
Wow.
And when we got to our aunt's house, we asked her about my grandfather, and she told us the same story. And she kept saying us like, that's the importance of actually talking to your children, talking to your relatives about what you have. And because, and she told us like, you need to know what's going to what's the medical history of your family and what did they pass away, and that's something, and you need to embrace yourselves for any kind of situations. I was like, okay, that wasn't what we were talking about, but why are you mentioning it? Like, that's the
Right.
thought that kept going through my head. And she was like, no, because there are some things that you need to know from time to time. And in uh, I remember that my brother and I asked her like, okay, why are you telling us this? And she told us like, no, but it's nothing to worry about. But what you need to understand is that your father is going to get his kidney removed, because we didn't know by then. We just knew that he had something in his kidney and he was going to
Uh-huh.
have surgery.
Uh-huh.
We were like, okay, so it's a regular surgery. They're gonna take off a piece of the kidney. I don't know. Like,
Right, right.
I still
Right,
remember
right,
it. Like,
right.
and she told us that, and she kept implying like, you need to know what's going to happen, and we were like, yeah, he's going to have a surgery. Like, that's it.
Right, right.
And she told us like, yeah, but you need to understand that even though it's a pretty easy surgery, you're going to the recovery can be a little bit harsh. And we're like, okay, yeah, we can totally do it. I
Right.
kept thinking like, I'm 22 years old. Fortunately, I have a car. I know
Mhm.
my city. I know everything, and I have this stable job that I can provide for a couple of months since
Right,
he recovers.
right.
And so we went back to our house with our like 3 pound turkey. With just a turkey just right here under my arm.
Okay.
And my brother in the middle of the road tells me like, that was pretty strange. I was like, yeah. I told him about our interview, and
Yes.
he told me like, nah, that's something, that's just life. Like, it must be a coincidence. And I just kept thinking like, there has been 3 coincidences, Gabriel.
Right.
It's
Right, do
it's
you
weird.
yeah, is it still a coincidence when these different things are happening so close together that seem related, but
Yeah.
also odd?
Yeah, and it was what I think it's unbelievable. It's that these 3 coincidences happened between 12 p.m. and 5 p.m. Like, they just went boom, 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 boom. Because I finished my interview with you, I went to the kitchen to start making my lunch. Maybe half an hour, 45 minutes passed. I was eating, received the call, finished eating, worked a little bit more, had to pick up my brother. Was in just 5 hours, I received this whole information about my family that I haven't had in 22 years.
Wow.
Yeah,
And then when did you find out that your dad passed away?
I think that's the. Yeah, I do gotta say in here, but I think that could be maybe the worst part, because uh, I just saw the closet open and I was like, okay. It's so funny because even the light turned on and I was
I
like,
know, right?
okay.
Ah.
Yeah. No, I figured out the next day, like um, the next day, I was cooking lunch again. I was all by myself at my house because my mom wasn't there. I remember that when I woke up at like 7 a.m., I'm an early bird. I
Mhm.
woke up and my dad sent me a photo of him, like a quick selfie, like going right now into surgery. We'll text you, and I remember, and I actually knew about the time that he was going to enter surgery at 8 a.m. and he was going to get out at 1:30. It was like, that's how much the surgery was going to take. So I just had this little bug in my mind that was like, don't think about it. It's not going to happen. It's not what you think it is. And when I was cooking lunch here in my house, it was like it was like 2 p.m. And I was like, well, just half an hour. That, it's normal. If flights get delayed, I can imagine a surgery. Like,
Right, 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 right.
yeah. And I checked my maternal's family WhatsApp group, and I never do that. But it was one quick message that caught my attention because they all kept saying like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. What? I couldn't believe it." And when I got into the message, the first message that appeared, it was my dad's name was is Elias,
Uh-huh.
and it said Elias falleció. Elias passed away. And I was like, oh damn, like that's how I found out that my dad passed away.
You hadn't heard it from your mom. You saw it on the WhatsApp group chat.
Mm-hmm.
Oh
And
my goodness.
because of all the paperwork and all the stuff and
Oh
everything like
my
that,
goodness.
my
Oh,
mom,
I'm so sorry.
yeah, and I was all alone in my house until about like 5 p.m. It was 2 p.m., so I had like 3 full hours just by myself, like I don't know, with a with a plate of turkey that my aunt got us. Like, just was sitting like there, like I don't want this turkey anymore. Like,
Right. Yeah, totally lost your appetite.
yeah,
How
and
did
was a no, no,
how
go
did
ahead,
you
sorry.
manage? How did you manage that? What were your
Um,
thoughts?
First of all, I thought, oh well, this is an important part. Just before that message, I received a call from my godmother, and she was like, "Hi, how are you?" She's just she's pretty she's a pretty conversational person, and she just went straight on. Hi, how are you? How are you feeling? And I was like, okay, I'm just
Yeah.
yeah, I just finished work. I'm a little hungry right now. And she
Mhm.
was like, are you driving? I'm like, no, I'm just at my house cooking lunch. And she was like, oh, okay. And I hear my godfather on the back, like, hang up. Don't tell him anything. And I was like, oh, man,
Oh
I
my
already knew.
goodness.
Yeah. And
Oh
then,
my
like,
goodness.
10 minutes later, I got the message and I was like, oh, okay. And what I did was the first thing that I did when I found out was I sit on the floor because I needed to sit. My dog came in and she was like, it's funny how you can see that dogs understand you, like,
Mhm.
because she went in and I wasn't crying, and that's something that I'm actually amused that I didn't cry during that time.
Mhm.
She just hugged me. She just stayed in there. She snuggled with me, and I
Oh.
called again my godmother and I was like, I know. I told her like, I know what what should I do? I asked her what should I do, and she told me, she just kept repeating like, don't drive. Whatever you do, don't drive. I was like, okay, so I just gotta stay put apparently.
You just had to stay there in your thoughts, but at least you
Mhm.
had the dog
Yeah,
comforting you, which what a blessing.
yeah. No, I really think because we adopted her like last on 2022, maybe last
Mm.
July, and she has been through these times like the most helpful being that it has ever been, because
Mm.
and we actually, because I have a friend whose dad is a veterinary, and he told us like, when you're feeling sad, your dog can tell, and they
Mm.
have a sense of humor, so they'll do everything kind of like clumsily or silly just to make you laugh when they're seeing you sad.
Oh.
Yeah,
Wow. Oh, wow. That's Thank you for sharing that, Raphael.
whenever you want.
That I think that one of the thoughts that comes to mind is, you didn't even tell me about your dad until really it was weeks later, maybe even months later
Yeah,
that you told me, and so it it it's a reminder that you never know from day to day what the person in front of you may be going through. You have no
yeah,
idea when you're sitting next to somebody on the bus or you know, being interviewed by a journalism student.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
we just really, really don't know what somebody may what pain somebody may be carrying in their heart.
Yeah, totally, totally. I remember I didn't tell you because we were planning at first we were planning everything for the podcast launch. And
Mm, mhm.
and during that time, like when we I think that we were recording the audio for episode 0 and getting the Zencaster license.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was like, okay, so this is a good distraction. I don't want to talk about it.
Oh,
I know that she's the one that I have to talk to. I
yeah.
know that I had to talk to you, and it was going to be one of the greatest. And it was. You've been really helpful to me in most of the teachings that you've done. I'm your patient zero. So, and
Wow.
yeah, I can tell you that this podcast works because I've been listening to podcast. I'm from since episode 0, literally, and
Yeah.
I've listened some of the episodes even twice because I need to edit them. So
Right, right.
I know the stuff that you work in here, the stuff that you say, it does help, and how you've been treating me during this whole experience. Just before I told you, like I think that before I told you, you were preparing me for something like you're always open. You are always open to talk about whatever, and so
Mhm.
you kept saying like I don't know if you ever had something to talk about, if you want to have an episode about your abuela, and if you want to do anything, just let me know. And I was like, I appreciate that like really, really much. Thank you.
Mhm.
So
Well, and I know, you had mentioned that, the episode with my son Ben, when you edited that, that that really spoke to you too. Is that
yeah, yeah. And because actually when I edited that episode, I had already listened the episode before. I think it was one of your first recordings. And before we started doing all of this launch, I remember that we had a meeting that I told you like I'm going to listen just one of the episodes random. I'm just going to pick one randomly
Mhm.
and see what happens. When I heard that first episode unedited, that's the moment that I knew that I had to talk to you and that I had to give you the news. And it was because the Ben's episode really got part of two parts, like the being the man of the house kind of like concept. That
Mhm.
that's one thing that I thought and I told all of my uncles. It's like I know that maybe I have to be, but just don't tell me. I know it. I know it. You can't come up to me and tell me like you're saying sorry to my mom. You're saying sorry to my brother. You're telling them that they can count on you. And why am I the one receiving the message like, okay, so you got to take care of everything, you know?
Right, 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 right. That's a good point.
Yeah,
That's a really interesting point. I had not thought about that. I have seen that in certain circumstances, um, certain people close to a loss are given a lot of sympathy, right? It's like what you're saying with your mom. There's always a lot of sympathy given to the wife, to the mother, but sometimes people forget, like when there's a child that has passed away, it's almost like people forget that there's a father involved.
totally, totally. And they gave me like I felt like they were giving me a list of chores, like
Right.
a full task list. Like I remember that one of my cousins, and he lives abroad, and he texted me like 3 days after his passing, 3 days after the funeral, 3 days after everything, and he told me like, "I'm so sorry, bro. Like I'm so sorry, bro. That's period." And then he went ahead and told me like, "But you know what this means? You're the man of the house now. So you gotta take care of everything. You gotta provide. I know that you're only 22 because I was close to having my birthday. I was close to getting to being 23, and
Right.
he was like, I know that you're only 22, but there's something that you gotta do. And I was like,
Yeah.
what? And I was like, you gotta take care of his truck. because he loved his truck. I was like, man, I'm not thinking about his truck. I have my very own car, and I'm just going through grief right now.
Exactly. This is such a good point. I'm so glad that you have brought this up
Yeah,
because, yeah, it's something that, it's interesting. Sometimes we think that men don't grieve well, but maybe part of the reason is because maybe they're not always allowed to grieve.
totally. So it's totally that. And here in Minnesota, that's one part of the cultural stuff comes to play, because from the episodes that I've heard, well, from the episodes that I've edited,
Which has been
and
all of them.
yeah, all of the men that you've talked to, they've been given the opportunity to grieve. Most of them have actually given that opportunity, and I think it's because in America you have the part like male sensibilization. It's a step forward than in Latin America,
Mm,
because yeah, in here we still have a pretty I think that it's called a pretty sexist culture,
mhm,
like male dominant culture.
mhm.
So it was like men don't cry, and
Right.
men don't cry. Men, you might be going through grief, but men gotta provide. Men gotta work. Men gotta do a lot of stuff, because if men don't do stuff, like even talking like like a caveman, if men don't work, civilization falls. And I was like, no, it's not like that.
That's right. That's right. And so your voice is an important one. Even though you're young, your voice is important, and maybe this maybe this is something that you'll be able to share with more young men. And
Yeah,
then as you become the older generation in your society, maybe you'll be able to model what may have been denied previous generations.
yeah. I'm actually kind of like trying to. I didn't cry. The funny thing, I still haven't cried my dad. I don't know if
Mm,
it was because of that training. Like,
mhm,
it's basically a training to do that kind of stuff. But it's because I'm not really a crier.
mm.
But from time to time, well, I've mentioned it. I tend to either zone out, or to just come up to you and tell you like, so I have this problem with my garage door, and my dad knew how to fix it. I don't know how to fix it. Like, I think that we spoke that like last week.
Right, right,
Yeah,
right. And that is one of those triggers
yeah,
for you. That's the grief trigger.
yeah. It
It,
is. And
yeah.
during those days, I'm not low, because I'm a pretty kind of like happy person. I think that I'm
Hmm.
a pretty energetic, and also I'm an extrovert. So I don't have
Hmm.
any trouble speaking nor speaking about this topic. But when I remember some stuff about my dad, the only question that I get is like, why? Like, I in because I was sorting my life out, and I was getting things done, and I was getting things right. I was like, okay, so I am. When my dad was going to be hospitalized, I was like, okay, I'm this close, like a tiny bit close to being in the peak of my game. Why did
Right,
that happen?
right,
Yeah,
right. That that's really tough.
yeah,
You know, let's go let's go back a little bit, because what I usually like to ask people is for them to tell me about the person they lost. And we know, obviously we're talking about your dad, but we don't know much about him. I don't know much about him. Tell me about your dad. What about his personality, about what you love about him?
okay. So, well, again, my dad's name is Elias. That's how you pronounce it in Spanish. It's Elias, for
Mhm.
Elias, or Elijah, for
Mhm.
in English. Um, Even though that you're hearing me like this and hearing how I talk in this, my dad and I have pretty opposite personalities.
Oh,
Like,
is that right?
yeah, he's a complete opposite. and even to the point that we would clash. That's something that really that really hurt me when he passed away, because we didn't always get along. We weren't the best of friends, but it's not because we didn't want to. It's because we were so different that it was so difficult to just understand each other. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and we actually, when he passed away, I thought, and he was doing an effort. Because I was doing an effort too, and he was doing an effort to better understand me and to better understand me and my brother. Because my mom and dad have this pretty technical sense of life. My mom studied computer science, and my dad studied was an HR administrator, and
Uh-huh.
my brother's an illustrator and I'm a video editor, so it's like complete opposites. Like,
Right, right. How interesting for them to have these really artistic kids,
yeah, and
right?
they even when they raised us, they were everything was like math related. Like they taught us like math, how to solve problems with math, and we kind of have like that technical part inside of us, but it's like it's not our stuff. And they
Yeah.
figured out, and since I'm the oldest, I was the guinea pig. So it's like,
Yeah.
I'm not going to be an engineer. I think that you should know that by now.
Oh, that's really funny.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's so interesting. And you know what? That's really sad
yeah,
because because at this age that you are, this really is a time when you kind of get to relate to your parents as an adult.
yeah,
It's different, and you're saying you and your dad were both making an effort to try to understand each other better.
yeah. Because again, we weren't the best of friends, but that doesn't mean that we had a bad relationship. Like
Sure.
we just weren't those kind of like father and son that will go to a baseball game together, but we can
Right.
sit and talk. Like, um, he also being an introvert. Like, he's
Mhm.
such an introvert, except when he's in confidence. When he's in confidence, he's even more extroverted than I am.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and well, one of the things about his personality that clashed with me was that, and he was technically an older dad compared to
Mhm.
others, because he had
Yeah.
me when he was like 43. So
Right.
so he was 60 when he had to take me to parties. So
Right.
like
Right. And he would have looked like he was your grandfather.
most of the times they called him my grandfather. Like,
Mhm.
I can tell you, no, well, not most, but 4 out of 10 times, and that's a lot.
Right.
And some of his teachings were like this, not only his teachings, but some of the ways that he was raised from clashed with my moral grounds too, because he was born in like 1956, I think, and I was born in the 2000. So
Right. So he's even more conservative, even more old-fashioned
totally,
than your friends' dads.
exactly, and I could say that, and that's the part where it clashed, because when I used to go into this artist stuff, and the type of content that I was seeing and the type of everything that I was, is I didn't mind. And this could be a little bit controversial about it, but I remember one time that we have, in Venezuela, they had these bracelets. We had these bracelets that were trendy. But the
Mhm.
thing about the bracelets is that you had to make them yourself.
Okay.
So I was like, I want to be on top of the game. I want to be trendy. I want to make my very own bracelets, because I'm not paying it. Because here in Venezuela, they're entrepreneurs, so they were selling the bracelets, and I wasn't going to pay for a bracelet. Like,
Okay.
and I remember that I went to my brother. I was like, let's get a bunch of these materials because they were so cheap. And let's not sell it, but let's just make a bunch of bracelets, and we can match them how we want to, and we can do whatever we want, because they are just colors. And
Right.
we were in my bed in here, and we were making those bracelets, and my father comes in, And it was like, I don't want you, I don't want both of you ever doing bracelets again. And we're like, why? And he was like, and he told us like, because that's gay and you can't do that.
Oh no!
and,
Oh
we're like,
no!
and we're both like, it's not gay, it's art. And then he
And
figured
even
out,
and even and even to say that phrase would have been like, Dad, nobody talks like that.
yeah, I wasn't offended, and not gay also,
Right.
so nor my brother. And well, we still gotta figure out about him because he's like 16, he can change his mind. But
Yeah, yeah. Right, right.
um, I talked to him because I was like 12 years old when that happened. I was like, I don't think that it's gay. Everyone is doing it. I
Right.
have male friends that I'm doing it. It was like, yeah, but you're not going to be one of those. I was like, why? And
Right.
that's the part that it clashed until I got into university, that he got to see the type of work that I've been doing. He was
Right.
like,
Yeah, got to see how your mind worked and
exactly, because apart from that, any yeah, from my father's side, not, I'm the first one to actually pick an artistic career,
yeah.
because
Wow.
I actually call it a journalism because it's easier for me to pronounce, but it's mass communications. I started mass
Mhm,
communications and specialized
mhm,
in audiovisual products.
mhm.
And it wasn't like until like my first thesis, because you have to do two theses in here in Venezuela,
Mhm.
um, that it was like a video clip. And he was like, okay, so this is how he thinks. This is how he views life. Now I
Wow.
get it.
Right. And again, at this moment when really you're probably making kind of a breakthrough, that must have been very, very difficult to have lost him at that time.
Yeah, no, it
For
was, it truly was, because he was really proud about. So I graduated in July. Well,
mm,
I finished my classes in July. I graduated on March this year,
mhm.
and I remember that my dad was also like a stone. He didn't. It was part of the age that he
Right.
was born. He didn't talk
Mhm,
about his feelings. He didn't
mhm,
say a lot. He didn't give the kind of like that merit aside from good job.
mhm.
And on July, I made my last thesis, my audiovisual project. It was a documentary about a ghetto in here, one of the most dangerous ghettos in Caracas. That
Wow.
actually, yeah, that actually through their own initiative became one of the safest ghettos in Caracas.
Really?
Yeah, and I was really into that project. And he never asked me about my thesis until he saw it, until he watched it, and he told me that's the first time that he actually told me that he was proud of me. And he carried a little pen drive, pen drive in his pocket, showing everybody that the
Oh,
documentary.
oh, that is so wonderful. I'm so glad that you have that memory
Yeah,
with
yeah,
your dad. So really even though he hadn't been real communicative, you know that he loved you and was proud of you, and that sounds like quite a gift that
yeah,
he
no,
was able to give to you before he
yeah,
passed away.
yeah. No, no, totally. I do gotta say something for parents because that affected me a lot during my teenage years, like between 14 and 17 years old. I was like, why can't you tell me like you're proud of me or you love me? And that can get into your mind. It was
Yeah,
later that I became an adult that I really understood like he's not that type of person. And it's okay. He loves me. He's doing
right.
a lot of stuff for me. He's paying my tuition. If he didn't love me, actually, he wouldn't pay this tuition. He wouldn't actually tell me like, because when I started those last semesters, when I was like, I need to upgrade my computer. I need to start editing again. I need a new camera and I need a new set of gear. He wouldn't have come up to me and told me like, what do you need to be successful? I was like,
Mm,
yeah. And so parents like, even though you don't feel like it, even though you're not, that's not your personality, but a little good job, great job, I'm so proud of you, or like showing the work of your kids really does
Mhm.
make a difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh. So tell me, um, who who do you who do you feel like you can really rely on, um, helping you go through this grief journey?
Um. Okay. So, well, first my dog. Like, she has been
Yeah.
so helpful. I love her. I do love her. I think that she became an emotional support animal. Um,
Mm.
and it that wasn't her job, but she just became that.
Mm.
um, since it's very recent, as of right now, I can talk to my mom sometimes, but it's not. It's still not a good source of it. I call her, but she can't call me because
Interest
she her the type of grief that she's going through is much more heavy. It's
Okay.
Yeah, because she has that pressure of I'm even though he's the man of the house in between and comillas, I don't know how to call them,
Quotation marks.
between quotation marks.
Yeah.
Oh, he's the man of the house. I am still the mother, and I have an
Yeah.
underage kid, and
Yes.
a barely graduated kid. So
Yeah.
there's some things that we need to sort out. But
So
about this,
she's
I can
feeling
talk
the
to either my
yeah.
to myself. I journal a lot. I talk to my aunt on my mother's
Mm.
side.
What is it about your aunt that makes her someone that you can go to?
She's like me, like, and I don't know why, but we're very much alike. Like,
Mm.
we understand each other. We make the same jokes. And something that I don't tell you is that the sense of humor is a really big part of my personality, and that's a big part of my coping mechanism as well. So
Mhm.
she's besides her and my old time friends, they're the ones that
Mhm.
understands that joking about it, it's my way to go through grief. Like,
Mhm.
the more regular that I make it, the more true it is. Kind of, if you want to see it that way, like the more I have to understand the situation that I'm in, because if not, I'm just zoned out every time, and I'm just like, my dad could be working, he'll be home by night. So,
Mhm.
but yeah, I can talk to my aunt, and I can talk to my dog. I can talk to myself and to my friends. I've had my the very same group of friends since like 2008. So
Mhm.
I know them, they know me, and they know how I process. They know how I view life, and they know that when I tell a joke about my dad, when I say something about him, it's because I'm thinking about him during that day. I'm grieving that day. So yeah.
Right. Right, and they know you well enough to know the context for the humor.
Yeah, yeah, totally. So sometimes they get uncomfortable, and I can totally understand them. I even told them, like, if I tell a joke and you don't feel comfortable about it, just let me know. Like, I know it's also a pretty difficult topic for you, because it's one person that you've been seeing since you were like 6 years old. So
Right,
it's a loss for you too.
right.
It's
That
not
is
only a loss.
that's exactly right. That's yeah, sometimes when we're the person closest or in that closest circle, sometimes we can even forget that others are grieving our person as well,
Totally.
even though they weren't as close.
And they can be even more affected than you, uh, like yourself. I know for a fact that my aunt, like this aunt that I'm telling you about, her name
Mhm,
is Eve.
mhm,
I know that Eve um, is going through a rough process. Like, she's not having a good time about my dad, because they were
mhm,
actually really really good friends. But
mm,
she knows that I actually, that's something that I had to talk to her, like, I think that you're one of those people that I can talk to. I need you to, when we talk about, if you want to talk about my dad, let me know, and I'll change my chipset, and
Mhm.
we'll play with your rules. But if I get to you, I need you to play by my rules, even though it kind of like it's difficult for you, but I need that support.
Okay, so explain that to me. What do you mean by that?
By the rules,
Yeah.
like, okay, so even though she's like me, she doesn't manage grief like me. She's
Mhm.
she cried a lot. She came to my house during the day that he passed away. She was actually the one that brought my mom from the hospital. She and her husband, my uncle.
Mhm.
And I know that maybe talking, like reminiscing about him, it takes a huge toll on her. Like I can tell by her face, I can tell by the way she talks. Like even my graduation, because when we were talking about it, she was the first. When we were talking about like this achievement, she was the first one, and maybe the only one that said like, "I hope, I really wish that your father was here." Not even my mom, my aunt.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, so she's that kind of griever. Like
Yeah.
it takes that huge toll on her. So when she starts the conversation about my dad, I just change that chipset into, okay, let's reminisce. Let's talk about how great my dad was. Let's do,
Right, right. Rather than shutting down, you
yeah,
know that she needs you to be present and allow her to talk about your dad.
yeah. And
Okay.
she's that type of reader that will tell you like, I miss him so much.
Yeah.
I want him to be here. I want to have a drink with him. And I'm
Yeah.
the type of reader that will just talk about this loved person as he never passed away. I was like,
Mm.
because most of the times I'm the one that brings the topic about my dad. And I think that it's because I feel this very pressure of like, I, everybody expects me to fill up his place. And I'm not filling that place. I have my own place.
Right.
He's Elias and Rafael. It's totally different.
Right.
Hey,
And how do you think your dad would your dad agree with you, do you think?
yeah,
Or
yeah.
so that's something that you would have in common then?
Yeah, he's one of the persons, he's one of the people that will tell me like, you gotta be the man of the house. But he'll tell me later on life, like he would have told me if he was my dad, he would have told me maybe in like March, and he passed
Right.
away in November. And he
Right.
will help me become that man. He's one of those like, i'm going I'm going to give you a set of instructions, but I'm going to accompany you. I'm going to be right there by your side while you become this type of person that you need to be. It's like, okay,
Right.
yeah, because he is 66 years old. He does believe in the man of the house figure.
Mhm. Mhm.
So yeah,
But he wasn't just going to leave it to you. He would
yeah,
have walked side by side.
exactly. He would have taught me. He would have told me everything. Like, and he had that kind of like, he was a pretty sympathetic guy. Like
Mhm.
he will, even though he wouldn't express his emotions, he would understand yours. So
Mm.
even, and not most of them, but he would, but he would understand when you need help, even though it's emotional help, physical help, and career wise help. He will be like,
Right.
I gotta go, and he feel that duty like he had to accomplish. Like I and it happened. I think that it was with one of my cousins when he became a dad. He went to his house. He was like, okay, so being a dad is actually really fun, but it's a really tough job. So
Mm.
you gotta do this, and that. And then he handed him like a bag of diapers. And he turned off. It's like, that's all you need to know. Just call me when you need me.
That's but very practical.
Yeah. It was
You know,
like that.
he really does sound wonderful.
He was.
He really does. Well, how has your faith or your spiritual life changed?
Because of that.
Mhm.
Um, well, on the very first days, um, it didn't change much. I'm not even though I'm a believer, and I don't, I'm one of those people that don't go regularly to church.
Mhm.
Um, and this is going to be a funny story, but one of the stuff one of the things that I really didn't like when he passed away, and that it kind of like affected my faith, was that we had to go to church like regularly, like for a whole week. And I was like, okay, I'm okay with that.
Okay.
But the father or the bishop or whatever on the church had the most annoying voice in the
Oh
world.
no! Oh
and, it's,
no!
and it's like, you're telling me that I have to go every day to church to listen to this guy
Oh
while I'm
no!
grieving?
Well, I'm grieving.
Yeah.
Oh no! Oh
I,
no!
and I even told my mom, like, can't we change churches? Like, can we go to another church? And she was like, no, because I already filed the papers for them to have this kind of like service just for your dad, and they're gonna bless his ashes. I was like, does it gonna be him? So you're telling me
Yeah.
that this guy is going to bless his ashes? I don't want that.
Oh my goodness.
And I was like, okay. And during those like 9 days, my faith was like, okay, so God is tying with me. He's playing me. Like, he was like, okay,
He has a
so
sense of humor.
yeah, he was like, okay, so Rafael is a jokester. I'm going to be a jokester with him too. I was like,
That's funny.
yeah. But then it came your podcast, and
Mm.
actually that helped me a lot, because and during December, January, we went through this another very tough process that those were the 2 weeks that I wasn't able to work.
Mhm.
And during that time, the only thing that I kept in my mind was, you still have some oil in your lamp. That's the very first
Mhm.
thing that you said to me. So, and it really helped. Like, it really, really helped during those 2 weeks. And then I started editing your podcast, and I started. One of the stuff that I didn't like about kind of like maybe praying is
Mhm.
because I don't mind praying, and I can do it from time to time. I've used that as a research for talking from time to time, but it was because um some in here they teach you to pray in a very technical way.
Right.
It's so much. It's not that it's a lot of work, but it's tedious. I don't feel connected when I do that,
Right.
because I don't feel like I'm talking. I'm just repeating some lines.
Right. And
And
especially with your creative mind, that's not gonna feel
yeah,
genuine or real.
exactly. And then I started listening to how your guest would approach to God, and how will they pray, and how
Mm.
will they do stuff. And it's like, okay, so this is legal. Like,
Yes.
like
Yes.
I can talk to him like he was a friend of mine, and
Yes.
that
Yes.
set the bar for everything. I was like, I'm a very casual guy. I like to talk very casually because it's easier for me. It makes
Yes.
me go through grief even better. And I was just laying in bed and be like, what's up? So,
Yes, yes. I
and
love that.
yeah,
I love that. That's interesting because even your response to the question when I was asking the question, which this just shows a little bit of a cultural difference, right, between
yeah,
your Catholic background and my Christian background. When I'm thinking about how your faith has changed, I'm thinking the inner, it the personal approach, not the actually going into the church, you
yeah,
know?
totally. And it's like, I'm, well, I gotta go to church today and hear that same father, because, well, today it's at 23rd, so it's been 5 months since he passed away.
Wow, on
And
today.
today, another
Oh
coincidence.
my goodness.
Yeah,
Wow.
I was like, I didn't
Wow.
realize it until like an hour
Just now.
ago. Yeah, like when my
Oh,
mom,
yeah.
yeah, like just before the meeting, because not even because of I saw the date. It was because my mom told me, like, okay, so when you finish that interview, get dressed, we're going to church. And I was like, why? It's a Tuesday.
Why? Oh my
So
goodness.
we gotta see him on a Tuesday. And he was like, today is five. And she was like, today is 5 months. And I was like, oh, today? Like, again?
So you know what this makes me think of, Raphael, is my good friend Julie Sipe, who's also just a fantastic Catholic.
Loved
Her,
her
you
episode.
know, oh, I love her episode, and her
Yeah.
perspective is that these rituals, these these physical things, they make a framework that allows you to stay connected,
Yeah,
right?
they really do.
And yeah, and so I kind of I love the thought that because you have this expectation that it's the 23rd and you are going to go and honor your father on this day, it also gave you a chance to to realize that God is aware of you.
Yeah, no, it totally.
Right? Because here he is like, oh, let's throw the interview on this day.
Yeah.
Just just to really remind you that
Yeah, that this is an important date. Like, because
yeah,
we've been planning this meeting. I think that it was since I told you that my dad passed away. Like,
yeah.
we
We
were
said
like,
we've got to do this sometime. Yeah.
yeah, we're like, when the day comes, it will come, and we'll have that interview. It's so funny that it was today. Like,
Exactly.
I think
Exactly.
that if it weren't today, it probably would have been like on November 23rd with the anniversary. Like,
Right.
I'm
You're
certain of
totally
it.
right. Right. So, final question.
I don't know.
What do you think it means to grieve well?
Got a funny, well, not funny, but a curious thing is that every time that I edit an episode and I hear this question, I always think like, how would I respond to this? And I've never gotten the answer. So I'm going to have to give it to you now.
Mhm.
Um, I think that you have to let it go through you. Like, that's the most important part. Like, you can embrace the grief because it can be a very, very, very beautiful, uh, I don't know, concept or a very beautiful time, even though it's also the most painful time of your life. It depending on the one you lost, not even depending. Every time that you lost someone, that you lose someone, it's going to be the most painful thing of the year, probably. But you can embrace it because something that happened to my dad was like, of course, my dad made mistakes, and of course that I have negative memories of him. But when I went through grief and when I started to missed him, and when I started to think about everything that he did for me, those kind of like bad memories just went away. I don't have bad memories about my dad. I just have the great memories, and I just know the man he was or the man he still is because his presence is still right here, and we all remember him with very much love and companionship. But in order to get to that point, you gotta let it go through you. You gotta be in there and understand that you're going through a process that needs to be it needs to, it's not getting through it again. It's like it's a process. It's just a process that could maybe change your whole perspective on life. And I'm pretty sure that after he passed away, it brought me closer to understanding what a father is. I think that the next step is just like becoming a father. But now I understand every sacrifice. Now I understand everything that he did and the type of person that you need to be.
That is beautiful.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that idea. It sounds to me like you are going to be an even more amazing father.
Oh, I hope so.
Yes. Well, and especially since you and your dad are so different, you have all that you learned from him, plus all that you are, that you will bring to some very lucky
Yeah.
kid or kids someday.
Yeah. Kids, I actually want more than one. Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much, Raphael.
Thank you,
I
Julie.
I've enjoyed our conversation. I always enjoy our conversations, but I
Uh,
love that today it's really been centered on you and your experience.
yeah, no, thank you. And I think that it's not our first conversation about our lives because we actually talk a lot. You're my bestie, Julie. Like,
Yeah, we're like this,
yeah,
right?
yeah. um, but you're also the first person that I've openly talked about this whole process, and I think that you're also the very first person that I can talk to. Like, I can say whatever. Like, I don't have to limit what I'm trying to say because it's not. Maybe it's going to hurt you, but it's not going to hurt like it would hurt my mom. I don't have to
Right.
limit myself. This is my time to let it go.
I'm so glad. I'm glad you feel that way.
Yeah.
Oh, all right. Well, that was wonderful.
Yeah.
And
Thank
we'll
you.
wrap it up.
Yeah, this is where the song comes on. Like,
That's right. Do, 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 do.
yeah.
Okay.